Carl, what have you done?
Think anyone will notice? Mr. Carl Jackson.
Carl Jackson was born and raised in Los Angeles, California. After the sudden death of his mother at the age of 11, he moved between LA and Orlando, Florida, trying to find his way in life.
So I'm clearly a Carl Jackson fan.
Carl Jackson.
Carl Jackson.
Carl Jackson.
Although he was introduced to hard work, faith, and family values, as a struggling teen, he wandered down the path of least resistance, finding himself jailed twice. By the grace of God, he attended an evangelical church and found that there was a better way and accepted Jesus Christ as his Savior.
There's just no fake stuff about Carl Jackson.
Now, on the Salem Podcast Network, Carl has launched on a journey to help people of all races and backgrounds to discover facts of America's true past, as well as realize the benefits of utilizing their God-given gifts and talents, which far outweigh any benefit from a government subsidy or program.
It's dangerous out here. Let's roll, Carl.
Get going fast.
Redeemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Podcast. Listen, I am so excited. We have a great show lineup, a great lineup for you today. We have Jorge Bonilla of the Media Research Center Latino joining us, and he's going to be talking about the border crisis and the ramifications of that, as well as what he sees going on in the Latino community leading up to November of 2022, polling, so on, etc. It's always a good time to talk with Jorge. Also, after the interview, I do want to touch on what's happening in Ottawa with the truckers. A couple of the organizers have been arrested. It is scary to see that, or scary to recognize that we are starting to see tyranny right at our own borders. It's absolutely terrifying. And I do want to address the issue with Amazon has come out and they're dropping Black Lives Matter organization or donations to Black Lives Matter organization. And Black Lives Matter has ironically hired the former Clinton attorney, Mark Elias, to help them with their monetary scandal, their donation scandal. $60 million has come up missing. No one knows where the heck it went. Completely insane. But before I get to all of that, I want to go to my guest, Jorge Bonilla of the Media Research Center Latino. Welcome to the Carl Jackson Podcast.
Thank you, Carl. It's great to be here.
All right. Good to have you on. Like, Jorge, all right, so there were a couple of articles that I sent you and wanted to talk about, and of course, you being the person that you are and just immersed in the Latino community, the Latino news, all this kind of stuff. I just wanted to get your take on a couple of things, because it seems like the media is totally ignoring the border crisis that has not slowed down one iota, it seems, under the Biden administration, and we hear complete crickets about it now, and we have crime rising in different areas, in which we'll get to, and also we have people that are having to compete against illegal immigrants right here in the United States. Your take?
Look, the media is always going to suppress any kind of story that is inconvenient to the narrative of the Biden administration. Inflation is something that they got around to reporting belatedly after, almost they had to get dragged into it, kicking and screaming, whether it's the increased murder rates in some of our cities, whether it's gas prices. These are things that the media doesn't want to hear about, because it will not further and it will not electorally help the Democrats. And one of the areas where the Biden administration is most vulnerable is with immigration. Biden, when he ran for president, he made specific promises to Unidos US, which, if that name doesn't ring familiar, it's because La Raza did a little bit of a rebranding, and now they named Unidos US. But he went in front of him.
Wait, before you go on, Jorge, explain to people who La Raza is, just so that people understand exactly who you are speaking about.
The National Council of La Raza was founded in 1968 in Los Angeles, California. Basically as a Chicano advocacy group, but they got the idea that if they organized Hispanics nationwide under a set of common policy goals, that they could, the idea was to turn Hispanics into a voting bloc. Because up until then, there was not this, they wanted to create a monolith. You had separate pieces, kind of like the Lions and Voltron, Gen Xers and older millennials. You follow, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Right.
Like you had the Lions, you had the Puerto Ricans in New York, you had the Cubans in Miami, you had the Texans, you had the Mexican American community in Chicago. And so what La Raza sought to do was to sort of bring all of these people together under an umbrella Latino identity that did not exist until the 60s and the 70s. First it was Hispanics. They called it Hispanics. Then it morphed into Latino. And now some people are trying to make it into Latinx. But that's a whole other story, a whole other ball of wax. But what ends up happening is that umbrella group, that advocacy group, was called the National Council of La Raza. And in 2018, they rebranded and became Unidos US. And, they, like anything in DC, they collect a bunch of corporate money. When people want to, when corporations want to act like they're doing something for Hispanics, they go to La Raza, give them a bunch of money, which La Raza then turns around and funnels into Democratic campaigns because the Democrats are the party of open borders and unchecked borders, and that's what keeps these advocacy groups alive.
It's amazing.
It's like a vicious cycle.
It is. It's amazing how they mirror Black Lives Matter, if you will. I mean,
I was gonna say Planned Parenthood too, but it's the same. It's the same kind of grift.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's amazing how the left works. I mean, they want to destabilize communities. They want to destabilize America. They want to destabilize our institutions. They want to destabilize traditions. And if they can do that and get people angry, certain blocks of people angry, they can perpetually keep their vote. And it's like they always want to keep, that's how they keep the permanent underclass. They don't want Latinos to succeed. They don't want blacks to succeed. And unfortunately, you have these organizations like La Raza. You have the organizations like BLM, which I think it's so funny because people will call me a sellout, Jorge. I don't even care. But people will use that terminology towards me. And I'm like, really? So the people that are really selling out the community for a profit, they're not the sellouts. But the people like me that sit there and say, listen, man, God has given you certain gifts regardless of your skin color. Use them. You'll be successful. Nobody's holding you back. It's absolutely insane to me. But I appreciate that clarification of La Raza because I think people really need to understand the groups that are involved in this problem with illegal immigration beyond the Mexican cartel. What's going on right here within the United States of America? So it's extremely important. What I want to jump to, Jorge, is the crime that we're seeing as a result of illegal immigration. Oh, actually, I do want to take you back to this because you mentioned something that I think is counterintuitive, and that is amongst the Latino population. Amongst the Latino population, there is they're not necessarily down with open borders. People would think, okay, Latinos down with open borders, that's fine. Come one, come all. But that isn't true, is it?
No, it's not. And if I could just 2 quick seconds to add to what I was saying about the Latino identity that these organizations manufactured in conjunction with the U.S. government for census reasons. What these groups do is kind of enforce the orthodoxy of that fake identity to the point where new immigrants that come into this country almost have to have a double assimilation. You have to assimilate almost into what it means to be Latino in the U.S.
Wow, that's a good point.
And make a choice whether you assimilate into that or assimilate into the United States. Because if they could keep you inside of that little Latino box, they can control you. They can discourage learning English. They can keep you watching Univision and Telemundo and getting your news from those sources instead of, independently figuring out things on your own, and sort of keep you in that box to where they can say, oh, well, you got to vote for the party of Hispanics or the party of the poor. If anything sounds familiar, Carl, stop me at any moment. But this is how they keep the community inside of this box. And so, but what happens is that when Hispanics begin to see beyond, they begin to break away from that. And I was just looking at some polling from this morning. The NRCC put out an internal poll that showed that Hispanics are breaking away from Democrats on a bunch of areas, whether it's crime, immigration, the economy, public safety, inflation, you name it. There is this disconnect, and this sort of creates, for the Republican Party, for conservatives, it does create an open door for engagement. And I'm going to give a word of caution. This is not a reason for everybody to become irrationally exuberant, but there is an open door. There is an open door for the right to engage and to persuade and to go into the community and make an affirmative case for how we're different and what things we can do. How can we advocate for the community, whether it's on school choice, whether it's on the economy, on entrepreneurship, on crime, on all these other things. So the polling is not and I give a word of caution here, it's not an end-all be-all in and of itself, but it is a good opportunity and a good open door.
It's an indicator. It's an indicator that you can go into the Latino community. The same is true for the Black community. When certain issues are hurting any particular community, any of these boxes that the Democrat Party deems as their own, you can go into that community and say, hey, they're doing this, but here's what we can do for you in an attempt to bring them out of that box and to help people think for themselves again. And obviously that's what the Democrat Party, that's what the Democratic apparatus fears: individual thinking, individual liberty. And for these, if Latinos and Blacks, this is the craziest thing. This is one of the reasons I love having you on, Jorge, because I think our communities in so many ways mirror each other as far as our experiences within the United States. But it's like the American dream is available to both of our communities. It was so funny that you talked about somewhat of I love the way you put it, even though now I've somewhat forgot how you can remind me. But basically, when illegals or immigrants come in to the United States, Latinos, Hispanics, or what have you, it's like there's got to be two types of assimilation: one into the community, one into the United States. But if they're assimilated into the community, which may be left wing, then they're not necessarily assimilated into the United States. I feel the same is true for the Black community. Even though we're here, it's like, well, if in order to be Black, you have to believe like this. And most people, sadly, too many Black voters can't get around that and say, hey, I may share your skin color, but God has created me as an individual, and I'm going to do what he tells me to do.
It has gotten to the point, Carl, where people are told that to want to assimilate into the United States, to want to learn English, to want to pick up the ethics of working hard and hustling, and that these things are an alignment to whiteness. That if you do these things, you are aligned to whiteness. So you're absolutely right in terms of the Hispanic community and the African American community. There is a lot of common ground. There's aspects of the history that are vastly different. But it's funny because the left in this whole intersectionality thing tries to equate in many ways the immigration struggle with the civil rights struggle and with the ending of Jim Crow, and that somehow being illegal in this country. Look, coming to the United States illegally is on no planet, by no measure, by no stretch of the imagination, is it comparable to a community that had to deal with chattel slavery and come out of that, go through a half-baked reconstruction, and then get thrown into the Jim Crow regime and still deal with the pain and the repercussions of that.
Right.
In no ways is that alike. Is that similar? Do we have some similarities coming out of that and going forward? Yes, we do. Do we have some common shared experiences and some common humanity and love for family and love for community? Yes, we do. But the left tries to in many ways, appropriate the unique situation of the African American community in order to organize and get Hispanics into that grievance politics. Yeah. It's very insidious stuff.
Yeah, it's amazing how they're able to pull it off. I haven't purchased this book, but I need to. It's by this gentleman. I believe his name is James Lindsay. I've been hearing some interviews of his called Race Marxism.
Conceptual James, yes.
Yes, thank you. Yes, he's very smart guy. I'm going to have to get him on the podcast here, but and get his book. I literally tried to order it last night, and the only thing that was available was Kindle. And honestly, I like hard copies because I'm scared that the left will just totally try to erase America as it exists. So I like hard copies. I like to be able to scribble and stuff. It helps me when I write down stuff to remember stuff. And I just want to have I want to have something that is physical that can remind me of the times that we're living through with all these big tech, oligarchs that want to censor stuff, revise history, so on, etc. But immigration continues to be a big problem, and I think the Biden administration and their defund the police nonsense, which they're all of them are trying to backtrack on, even the squad, pretending, except for Cori Bush, pretending as if it never came out of their mouths. It's the craziest thing that I've ever seen in my life, especially in this age when you have so much video and audio. But this is going to be a problem for the Biden administration because more and more crime is going to begin popping up, even if it's not making national news. Hopefully, and I assume that it is. It's going to make local television, or it's going to hit local television stations, and inevitably people are going to find out, wait a minute, this was an illegal alien. This could have been prevented. One of the articles had tipped just the news that I sent you earlier. It starts like this. What do all these people have in common? A 5-year-old riding in her mother's car, a Texas sheriff's deputy on routine patrol, a Florida father who thought he was fostering a minor, a Mississippi woman pistol whipped as she talked on her cell phone, 3 people found burned to death in a car in Alabama. Not only are there more crimes being committed by illegals coming into the country, but some of these crimes are getting pretty horrendous and gruesome. Jorge, your take?
It is. Look, if the problem with allowing this unprecedented run of illegal immigration into the country is that you give a measure of power to the cartels that are smuggling humans across the border. And any time that you put someone with, that was smuggled into the country in a state that's away from the border in the heartland, you also give the cartels additional footprint into the country. Because wherever there is a smuggled human being, there will soon be a cartel member trying to collect that money.
That's a good point.
So it is natural that crime is going to spread. Even, we know that a lot of these people, that they're not, criminals or whatever have you, that they want to come and do better for themselves, do better for their family. Many of them are, and let's face it, many of them are economic refugees,
right,
so to speak.
Right.
They're not fleeing communism. They're not fleeing.
They're not true asylum seekers.
Yes, they are economic refugees who just want to come here and work. I understand that. But they were smuggled here by transnational criminal organizations who want to collect that money and keep that business going.
Right.
So that will give them a footprint in our cities, and that is problematic. And, Vice President Kamala Harris was sent to deal with the border and handle the border, even though she denies that was her role. And then she shifted to root causes, but neither the border nor the root causes have been handled. So unfortunately, as the border continues to go unchecked, and as you have hundreds of thousands of people that we know of coming in every month, unfortunately, until such a time as our government gets serious about border security, you're going to see these things continue to happen. And not to relitigate the past, but when, back in 2014, when I ran for Congress, I kind of foresaw some of this, and I would talk about this.
Right.
And it was tough because on the one hand, you're competing with a sort of Chamber of Commerce wing of the Republican Party that is okay with the cheap labor coming in.
Right.
And also competing with an open borders left. So when you look at people and you say, hey, we need to secure the border first, and we then need to deport the deportables, and then maybe we can start having a conversation about everybody else, and we need to take Kennedy off of the books and rewrite immigration law,
right,
so that it prioritizes our national interest and our national needs. People look at you kind of cockeyed.
You know what?
But this is the result of not doing what we had to do back then, is what we see today.
You know what? And
unfortunately,
and you're right to ascribe blame to both parties. Yes, the Democrats may be the party of open borders, but if you don't have Republicans that have the courage to stand up and speak out against it and do something about it, instead of, hey, listen, we want cheap labor, I don't know why that's morally okay for anyone. Perhaps if we stop sending our jobs and shipping our jobs overseas, our manufacturing to places like China, I mean, we could afford higher wages inside of the United States, and certainly we wouldn't have a lot of the supply chain shortages that we're seeing today as a direct result of having, a feckless president that doesn't know what he's doing, and Pete Buttigieg that doesn't know what he's doing, but also just getting there's even though I know we still manufacture stuff inside of the United States, I think coronavirus made it abundantly clear that we do not do enough manufacturing inside of the United States anymore, and it's really important to bring back that sector, if you will, of the economy. I love the way I call it working class, but I love the way Charlie Kirk frames it as the muscular class. You're going to get a lot of illegals competing against working class Americans, and this is another thing that we have to take into consideration. But and perhaps I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I was so happy that you did ascribe blame to both parties, because both parties do play a part. Even though I'm frustrated that Biden is or Democrats are the party of open borders, Republicans are not without fault. Let me get back.
And again, part of the reason, Carl, I'm sorry to jump in.
Ahead.
Part of the reason for this is because you had that establishment wing of the Republican Party dominant for so many years. They litigated their Hispanic engagement on the terms of the left. When you make immigration your central engagement point to Hispanics, you're doing it on the left's terms. Either do we do amnesty or not?
Man, such a good point.
You lose focus on that, and that's why you lose Hispanics on everything else.
Instead of
immigration, although it's a tonal issue, it's not the end all and be all to Hispanics. Hispanics don't want to hear about all these mass amnesties you want to give when we're debating drag queen story hour in their public school kindergarten.
Right.
And whether or not to do it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. That is such a great point, because it's what the left does. The left is so great at creating narratives and putting conservatives and the Republican Party on the defense, and that is such a great point. That's essentially what they've done with illegal immigration. So instead of Republicans saying, listen, we have this to offer, you come to the United States legally, this is what you get. There's the American dream. There's opportunity like no one's belief here, opportunity that, you realize we're here. Otherwise you wouldn't have risked whatever it took to get here. But you're right. Yeah. They just buy into the left's argument and narrative. Such a good point.
Well, because again, it's convenient. It's from a big business, from a corporation. standpoint. Let's keep everything flowing. Let's keep and I understand that we are always going to need some immigrant workforce in this country. That's a fact of life. I've spoken to citrus growers in our state of Florida, and it's plain as day. You're always going to need some kind of immigrant workforce. That's fine. Legislate that again. That fits in within a national needs focus on immigration. But you don't have to let everybody else come in. You know what I mean? You don't have to have that uncontrolled immigration where it's not even as much from the northern triangle. You got people coming in from all over the world, from all parts of the world. So it doesn't make sense. And again, going back to the polling, there's an opportunity there for the GOP, but you have to use it. You can't lean back on we're not Biden, and Biden's doing these terrible things, and let me not do. You gotta do for the people, whether it's on education. And that's an underlooked subject, especially among Hispanics. And again, the left frames everything as being centered around immigration. The Latino interest media, because they need that steady flow of immigrants coming in, they need there to be open borders as well. So they don't talk about it too much. But parental sovereignty and education, that's a huge issue among Hispanics. A lot of people don't know this nationally, but Ron DeSantis' secret sauce in 2018 was school choice Hispanics and African Americans.
Yeah.
Because Andrew Gillum ran and he said, I'm going to mess with that, with those school vouchers and that school choice. Yeah. And there's a lot of black and Hispanic moms that said, hold up, no, you're not.
They were surprised. You are absolutely right. Good point. They were absolutely surprised. The Democratic media were that Ron DeSantis had garnered so much support from the Latino community, moms, and from black mothers that wanted their children to be able to have better opportunities in the educational system. So very good point. And speaking of that, it's so funny. One of the things that we don't talk about is I was looking at this article from Just the News and how literally schools in border towns had to go on lockdowns where children weren't able to. These are just some of the consequences that we never talk about of illegal immigration. You don't even think about. But it's, schools had to go on lockdown because of fear of growing crime near the border, drugs that are being brought across the border. So schools going on lockdown. And another aspect of open borders that isn't talked about enough, Jorge, and I think there's a connection there. And I think China is winning a war against America without firing a shot when it comes to these open borders and opioids and fentanyl flowing across our borders, because there has been a surge in deaths in the heartland of America, in Missouri and Ohio, places like that, where fentanyl is coming from across our southern border, making it into these states. And here's what I fear. Here's what I don't think a lot of people think about. Who are the patriots most likely to be willing to go and defend our country? I think it's going to be people that grow up in middle America or flyover country, if you will. And I'm like, man, China is killing these guys or killing us without even firing a shot.
Well, China's waging sort of this soft war on multiple fronts against us. And they're doing two things while they're flooding fentanyl across the border and flooding the border with fentanyl and sending it into the country. They're also entering into negotiations with these countries in Latin America and sort of eroding American influence in these countries, enticing these countries with what's called the Belt and Road. Argentina was the latest one to sign on. So if you look at that entire hemisphere, a significant number of those countries have Chinese Belt and Road projects. And for those that don't know, the way Belt and Road works is that China will come into a country, a developing country, and they'll say, hey, we'll help you with with whatever big piece of infrastructure you need, whether it's a road, whether it's a port, whatever it is. We'll send the crews, we'll send this and that and help you and finance it, and we'll give you this loan. But if you can't pay back the loan, we're going to control some critical piece of infrastructure that's vital to your country.
Amazing.
Give me that port. You can't pay the loan? Give me that port. And then that becomes an access for the People's Liberation Navy to port out of when they're coming into the hemisphere. And you got all these countries, they're doing a canal right now in Nicaragua, just to give you an example. A canal to rival the Panama Canal.
Wow.
So China's playing like a double game here. China's playing 8-level chess, and we're stumbling in Parcheesi.
Oh my God.
It's kind of sad to watch.
We're asleep at the wheel. Oh my God, that is completely eye-opening, and I'm considering the morale that has to be completely shot with Customs and Border Patrol and law enforcement that are unable to do their jobs when it comes to Customs and Border Patrol, and the unnecessary danger that a lot of local police officers are being put in. Some that was, I have a story, where was it? Basically I think it was a sheriff's deputy that was shot and killed, a routine traffic stop by a sheriff deputy. A guy gets out, shoots him right in the face, scared to go back to his home country, and come to find out he was an illegal that had a previous record. So this is stuff unnecessarily so that local police departments, local sheriff deputies, so on, et cetera, are having to face. That's huge. And then you consider the Customs and Border Protection, the people on the border. I'm like, their morale has to be so low. How must it feel to go to work every day and know that you're not allowed to do your job?
It's terrible to have to go to work every day and not have your hands tied, but instead of doing enforcement, you're basically being a concierge for the people that come over the border.
Isn't that amazing? Number
one. Number two, we talk about defund the police, but think about this now. If you're sending migrants, tens of thousands of migrants into the interior of the country every month, and you don't also fund law enforcement additionally to help take care of the community and what's going on, isn't that sort of a backdoor defunding of the police?
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. I mean, I think Jose Villanueva of Los Angeles said just as much. Well, he talked about it with the vaccine mandates, but it's the same concept. Essentially, you're right. It's a backdoor way of defunding the police. It's amazing, and then we're all going to suffer the repercussions. So open borders has such a deleterious effect on our society, on America. It's absolutely dangerous. There's all types of repercussions that we just sometimes don't sit and think about, which is the reason why I wanted to have Jorge on. Jorge, if you would, give out your information, and if you don't mind, I'd like for you to stick with me just a few more minutes. I was going to talk about the Ottawa situation, truckers being arrested, and BLM without you. But honestly, I think all of this stuff goes hand in hand the more I think about it. So I'd love to just get your feedback on it as I talk through it. But would you go ahead and let people know where they can find you at online or wherever else you want to be found?
Absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at BonillaJL. That's BONILLAJL. You can find our work at mrclatino.org. That is mrclatino.org. I am proud to head the Spanish language, the Hispanic media division of the Media Research Center, where we defend freedom by combating disinformation in Spanish language media. All the stuff that you see on Telemundo, on Univision, on CNN en Español. CNN en Español shouted us out the other day on air,
serious?
Carl. He was, he was giving a report on this terrible poll that Joe Biden got, the awful CNN poll. And at the end of the report, he turns around and says, and these numbers ought to please our friends at MRC who always have an eye out for what we do. Yeah, that's right. We always watch. We're always watching. The eye is always on Telemundo, Univision, CNN en Español. So you can find us at mrclatino.org.
All right, that's good stuff. All right, so thank you for giving out that information. Make sure you guys check him out. MRC Latino. MRC, what is it? MRCLatino.com?
.org.
Okay, MRCLatino.com. Check him out on Twitter. And again, I'll ask him to give his information again before we close out the interview here. But I was going to tackle some of these issues without Jorge, but I'll be honest, I think they relate. I think they relate. Let me just share a poll with you that I saw on Breitbart this morning, Jorge. There's a poll that says only 35% approve of Joe Biden's job performance, and then it goes on. It goes on. And the guy just keeps slipping. It's crazy. I've never seen anything like this. Only 35 to 55% of Americans approve of Biden's job performance. A poll released Wednesday by Quinnipiac revealed Americans also gave Biden overwhelmingly negative marks on 6 issues that are important midterm election indicators, according to Quinnipiac. The Supreme Court was one issue, 40% approve, or 45% disapprove. And that's because he's just basically playing identity politics with the pick in, basically putting a black woman in. I don't understand how that could not be considered racist or how it's not demeaning, just totally demeaning. Hey, I'm going to pick you strictly based upon your color, strictly based upon what's between your legs. And so his nominee will forever be remembered as the basically affirmative action pick. This person may be smart. There's plenty of smart black women that are judges that I'm sure are completely capable of filling this role. But I hate the way that he went about it. And apparently, according to this poll, other Americans do as well. The response to COVID, 43% approve, 53% disapprove. Foreign policy, 35% approve, 54% disapprove. Tensions between Russia and Ukraine, 54% approve, 54% disapprove. The economy, only 33% approve, 61% disapprove. Gun violence, 24% approve, 62% disapprove. And I mention all of those to say these are issues that everyone is concerned about. Like, it doesn't matter if you're black, Latino. When it comes to the Supreme Court, if you're a voter, you're concerned about the Supreme Court. You're concerned about foreign policy. You're definitely concerned about the economy and high inflation. So these are issues that all people are concerned about. And when I see polls like this, just like we said earlier, I look at it as an opportunity for Republicans and conservatives to go in and to say, listen, this is what you're getting here from this administration. This is what we can offer to make sure that you have a better, stable life inside of America.
Right. Really, the thing that opened the door for Biden's polling to go sideways. People always had concerns about Joe Biden, but they, for whatever reason, they decided, listen, there's a lot of drama with Trump. Let's vote for Biden, whatever have you. And Biden very narrowly won, based on an electoral college model in some of these states. And I'm sure voters in Georgia and Arizona and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, if given a second look, they would probably rethink their vote. You don't get buyer's remorse, and if you do get buyer's remorse, you got to wait 4 years, and this is the hand that we're dealt with now. But really, what Biden was kind of polling okay. He got that benefit of the doubt early on, but when with COVID going on and everything, but when you saw that disastrous, catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan, and you saw Afghans falling out of planes, and our Marines getting blown up at the gates of the airport, at the Riyadh airport, that sort of opened a lot of people's eyes, and it gave people, a permission structure to kind of say, well, if Biden sucked at this, when he was supposedly, Mr. Foreign Policy in the Senate, if he sucked at this, well, let me analyze the rest of his record and see what else he sucks at. And the people ended up, finding that, oh my God, this president is not very good at presidenting. And I think that is the result of that. And as you saw the supply chain crisis blow up, and Biden said, I'm going to shut down the virus, and he did not. And you see the things happening, and kids still having to wear masks in schools, and you see crime, and you see everything else. I think that's where you see people really taking a hard look at Biden. But, it's again, it's an open door for engagement. It's not, nothing is a foregone conclusion. The right still has to do the work of going into the community, making an affirmative case for what you believe in, for what you can do, to not so much do for them, but what you can do to empower them, and when necessary, use the power of the state to remove some of those obstacles to their freedom, whether it's corporate censorship, whether it's big tech censorship, whether it's the low-key imposition of this Chinese social credit system that we're seeing between corporations and media, and Mike Lindell getting shut out of banking networks and all these other things. And we see what's happening in Canada. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but when you see what's happening there, will that happen here? Where they can use an Emergencies Act and freeze people's funds? Although we got the Patriot Act here, and we could do that too without advance warning. But that's another story. But
not necessarily, not necessarily so. But we'll finish your point. Maybe we'll touch on that.
But it does give people pause.
Yeah,
it does give people pause, and certainly the media enabled this. The media kind of made this possible by suppressing the Hunter Biden story when it came out. And when you look at everything else that's happening, now you look at how they're suppressing, to some extent, the John Durham story with that report and the findings of his new filing that showed that there was, in fact, some funny business going on with Donald Trump's DNS servers at the behest of government. It's a mess, and people have begun to look at that and consider that. And I think that the polling is a result of that.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I want to touch on this Ottawa thing, and perhaps we can, the Patriot Act, something that at the time I was all gung ho for. Yeah, we got terrorists, coming at us. Let's get them. Let's find them. Let's find them if they're here on our land. Let's weed them out. Little did we know that it would be used against Americans, and it's totally insane. I think our Department of Justice needs to be gutted, quite frankly. It's just a sad state of affairs. But let me go to this Ottawa situation, because I don't think that we could have imagined. This is another thing. Even though I hate what COVID has done to people, I feel like what Satan intended for evil, God turned to good, because it's opened our eyes to so many other things. And now I wish Republicans would, focus on Canada, even, and what's happening there with little Jussie Smollett Trudeau, and this little wannabe dictator. What a disgusting, evil, despicable human being this guy has turned out to be. But I do think this, and I know this is going to sound somewhat uncomfortable for those of you that don't just think in political terms. But I think this is an opportunity for Republicans to say, look at what's happening there. Don't allow this to happen here. And God Almighty, I think they could run away in a landslide with the House, the Senate, and continue with that momentum on until 2024. Let me just real quickly, briefly read part of this column and get your take. Canadian Freedom Convoy protest has been arrested in Ottawa. I do believe this is a little old, because I think there's a second person now, a woman, a female, if I recall correctly. Yes. Chris Barber's arrest was announced during debate in the Parliament of Canada on Thursday, which is insane to me. Barber, who is a senior convoy leader, is expected to face criminal charges, according to the CBC. He has previously said in a press release that politicians have declined to engage in serious dialogue The Ottawa police said that it does not confirm or deny investigations into individuals until charges have been filed, according to the report. They went on to say, "We understand your frustration and genuinely wish there was another way for us to get our message across. But the responsibility for your inconvenience lies squarely on the shoulders of politicians who have," these are the protesters talking, "who have preferred to vilify and call us names rather than engage in respectful, serious dialogue." And I feel like, honestly, I look at what's happening. It scares me that this is happening in the Northern Hemisphere, that it's happening anywhere in the West. But a couple of years ago, before COVID, I would have never imagined that this would happen here, at least not so quickly. I shouldn't say I wouldn't have imagined, because I did. I talked about this kind of stuff, but it was always kind of like in theory, this could happen if we don't stop this. This was like the end game of these certain policies. But I look at what's happening in Ottawa, and I'm like, it's an opportunity for Republicans and conservatives to capitalize on. And I also look at it and I'm like, oh, crap, this really could happen here, because the left is trying to do exactly this with their big tech censorship, colluding with these global, these corporations, global fascism, so on, et cetera. Your take?
It is. And the reason that the media is looking the other way is because this is done in furtherance of keeping COVID restrictions in place. There is this romance with the idea that government should have the power to ruin people's livelihoods, to order lockdowns and restrict businesses, and order people to get vaccinated and make that a condition of employment, and wear masks and have kids in schools wearing masks, and have vaccine mandates in schools and all these things. The government media complex and the corporate government media complex love these things because it gives a measure of power over the working class, over middle America, over the blue collar individuals. And it sort of further expands, that class distinction, if you will. So for the truckers to get up and fight against that, for Canadian truckers to stand up and say this isn't right, and these mandates aren't right, and this is not fair, and this is not respectful of due process, and this is not conducive to liberty, that really sent a cold chill into their hearts. And that's why you see the Canadian government rising up and doing the things that they have done. Canada, in many ways, constitutionally, they're very different from the United States. They don't have a First Amendment. Sure. They don't have a Fourth Amendment. They don't have, we take for granted the constitutional protections that we have here. But man, we have them. They don't have them in Canada. And for those who have been watching, we've known this for a while, because you've seen in years past pastors indicted for preaching biblical doctrine, okay? Whether it's on same-sex marriage or on anything else. You can be subject to hate crime legislation in Canada for exercising your faith and preaching what you think is right. So, in a sense, this does not surprise me.
Yeah.
What does this?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What does disappoint me is the media so willing to support the crushing of dissidents' rights, right? Because they are dissidents against the wrong thing, and it leads me to think: what if Donald Trump had ordered, when Minnesota was on fire, and our cities were on fire during the George Floyd riots? What if Donald Trump had ordered the imprisonment of the leaders, of the founders of Black Lives Matter, without due process, and frozen their accounts under the Patriot Act? What would have happened then? How would the media have covered it, Carl?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it would have been Jim Crow all over, slavery, all over again. You're right. It would have been absolutely insane. Sadly, we know that'll never happen because of our feckless media, or I shouldn't say feckless. They are strong. They're strong for the left and supporting the left-wing causes in America. It right. is a really sad state of affairs. But, yeah, that's That's an excellent analogy because you're right. I mean, things would be totally different now.
Look.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Carl. Another quick example. Yeah. You got the Washington Post, because I just remembered this as you were speaking. The Washington Post went out there, and you know that a hacker, there was this hacker that hacked into Good Send Go, and he got the donor list. The Washington Post took that list that was published online with that public information, that doxed information, and started calling donors in the United States and talking about why did you give these $50 to this Canadian convoy. As this was happening, Black Lives Matter paid for the bail of the activist that shot at a mayoral candidate. I believe it was in Kentucky.
Louisville, Kentucky.
Who's
Jewish.
Yeah, Louisville, he was held on attempted murder charges, $100,000 bond, and BLM Louisville picked up the check.
Yeah.
Nobody is calling the donors of BLM Louisville to say, why did you help pay for the bond of this person who's accused of attempted murder for trying to shoot a mayoral candidate who also at one point was either a contributor or a columnist to USA Today.
Yeah, I mean, it's a scary thought, and this is why feckless Republicans just annoy the crud out of me, because I look at situations like this and I'm like, listen, all the left has is hatred. And they want people to hate you. That's all they have. So they're going to call you every name in the book. Get used to it. Yes. Move on. Make your points. Call them liars if you have to. Stand your ground. It's very important that Republicans start speaking out on issues like this. It's extremely important that we elect not just a person just because they say they're Republican. We really we want a track record if possible, or we want them to be able to say, I stand for this thing specifically. You want to get them on record so that you can hold them accountable. Republicans that don't do that, in my opinion, aren't worth voting for. But it's issues like this that are extremely important because it's all the left has, hatred. And they use that hatred in order to continue to win elections. So if Republicans would confront the hate, expose their hate, even if you're not going to win everybody, you might win some people over. Extremely important. Last thing I want to touch on just real quickly here. Breitbart, Amazon Smile charity platform drops Black Lives Matter as the organization dodges calls for financial transparency. Actually, let me just go to the tip sheet because this is funny to me. So due to its failure to disclose where tens of millions in donations it received nearly 2 years ago have ended up, remember when Amazon adored them? From another story, this was on Twitter, from another story, Black Lives Matter has turned to Hillary Clinton's controversial campaign lawyer, the operative who commissioned the notorious Steele dossier to sort out the nonprofit's questionable finances. So a couple of things that are funny to me, or I shouldn't say funny, not like hilarious funny, but just crazy, insane to me, is one, you have these people that adored Black Lives Matter, helped donate millions of dollars to Black Lives Matter. I don't know if anyone, including Bezos, knew where the money was going except to be redirected to the Democrat Party. I think everybody knew that. So I think there's some, just some lying and CYA going on here to be completely.
Don't forget the Hollywood mansions. That's where the money.
You're right.
The money went to the mansions.
Yeah, there was a mansion in Canada they purchased too, right? I mean, this is insane. But this is honestly, it shows you how much of a fraud Black Lives Matter is. You don't know where the money went, and then it's Black Lives Matter. Where do they go for help? Hillary Clinton's attorney, Mark Elias. So Black Lives Matter goes to this white attorney for help. We don't know where the money is going. Supposedly, Black Lives Matter is helping the black community when more cities were burned down and so on. Crime is up. It's just totally insane. Let me get your take on that real quick, and then we'll close this out.
It's funny how the Democrat establishment always pops up in these cases. You talk about Mark Elias, in addition to the Steele dossier, his big claim to fame is redistricting. And anytime a Republican state does a redistricting map, he's there to sue it, to fight it in court, and he's there to tell Democrats how to do how to do their aggressive redistricting and not have a problem with it. So it's funny that you mentioned that. But also in the NFL lawsuit, Brian Flores suing the NFL for all kind of racial stuff, discrimination, Rooney Rule violations, and for their for the uncompetitive practices. The NFL's lawyer in that case is former Attorney General Loretta Lynch. So, yes, who was on the tarmac with Bill Clinton in Arizona. So it's always funny how these things kind of circle back and come around, and how the tentacles of the establishment sort of appear in the Democrat establishment in the most unlikely places. But it's not at all surprising. You know, Black Lives Matters. That's where the money went.
Nothing more than the front group for the DNC. That's all they are. Uncle BLM is what I call them. That's all they are. They're not out to help black people. They hurt black people. Crime is up. Poverty is up in black communities as a result of these people. Hatred is up. Racism is up. Black people becoming more racist and claiming they can't be racist. But we all got to stand before God, and He's not going to be worried about our skin color when we're standing before Him. But anyway, Jorge Bonilla of the Media Research Center Latino, I appreciate you joining us today. Please, one more time, give out your information so people can follow you. And I appreciate your time today.
Man, it's always fun to come on and chop it up with you, Carl. Always. We've been doing this for years, and I always enjoy it. It's always a great time coming on with you and talking about the things that need to be talked about. You can find us at mrclatino.org. That is mrclatino.org. You can find us on Facebook at MRC Latino. Find MRC Latino on Twitter as well. And my Twitter page, or my Twitter handle is Bonilla JL. That's BONILLA JL.
All right. I appreciate that. Jorge Bonilla of MRC Latino, thank you very much for joining us today on the Carl Jackson podcast, soon to be renamed, and perhaps with your help too, Jorge. So thank you for that little insight information there.
Thank you.
God bless you. All right, and listen, guys, I just want to remind you to please follow me on Facebook, Carl Jackson Radio, on Twitter and Parler at Carl Jackson Show. And please, wherever you find podcasts and video and podcasts, video and audio, please search for me. You can find me on Apple, Google Play, Spotify, Rumble, YouTube. Make sure you click on the bell to get the notifications. But please help us spread the message. Our mission here is simple. I want to make sure that we exalt our Judeo-Christian heritage. I want to make sure that we exalt the Constitution and our Bill of Rights. And I want to make America great again, if you will, by reestablishing or the manufacturing and working class inside of the United States of America. If you're on that mission with me, you want to help me out, please, please, please like the page, share our videos, share our audio, and just talk about us. Spread the word, if you will. I'm in the fight with you for freedom. We have to save this country. We get our first crack at it in the midterms of this year. But please help me in the fight. I will be a voice for you. I will be a voice for the working class. Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, Rumble. Find us there. Like, subscribe, and share. God bless you. Until next time, don't grow weary doing good.